Welcome. It has just gone 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday the 13th of May, and you are watching episode 131 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap, providing an insight on the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode, no mountain to climb, are my guests, Marc Hendrickx, geologist, author and blogger, and Alan Keane, Executive Member of Save Our Summits Association. Marc graduated from La Trobe University with first class honours in geology in 1993. He spent the first part of his career in regional mapping at Geologist, making geology maps for state geological surveys in Victoria and Northern Territory, as well as in New South Wales. In the early 2000s, Marc shifted focus to engineering geology with employment with the New South Wales Main Roads and Traffic Authority and various private engineering consultants. He formed his own microgeological consultancy in 2012 and has since then worked focused on slope risk analysis, training and other geological issues related to transport sector for various clients. Alan has recently retired. He was a horticultural landscape gardener and maintainer, business owner, as well as a retail and wholesale nursery owner-operator. He is passionate about the environment, a nature lover, and is an avid hiker. Welcome, Marc and Alan.
Good evening, Bill.
Okay.
Gentlemen, it's good to have you here, but the circumstances are pretty dire because it doesn't seem the governments are overly keen to consult, negotiate on any of these sort of closures, and they seem to have more and more earmarked around the place.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. There's a long list of mountain summits, lakes, beaches, picnic areas, rivers that have been marked for closure. Either they're closed now, or there's potential for them to be closed in the future. In the last, since about 2017, I've looked at two of those in a lot of detail. So I started off looking at the Ayers Rock closure. Ayers Rock was pretty close to me because when I worked in the Northern Territory, one of my first jobs was to take a NASA planetary scientist to the top of the mountain, and we stood there. And he came to Central Australia because it looked to him so much like Mars. He was working on the Mars Pathfinder mission. So it was a real pleasure to take him up to the top of Ayers Rock and have a look around and talk about the geology with him. In 2019, to their great shame, the Liberal government, led by Susan Lay, the then Environment Minister, closed the climb. They said that they'd reached a couple of key targets they were looking for. One of them was that they reckoned that less than 20% of people wanted to climb the mountain. Those figures were completely made up and skewed. So, in my book, A Guide to Climbing Ayers Rock, I talk about the way they skewed and fiddled with the statistics. So what they did was for more than half the year, the mountain was Ayers Rock was closed due to it was too windy, it was too hot, it was too wet. So when you went there, odds on the climb was officially closed, so you couldn't go there. When you look at the real figures, when the climb was open, more than 50% of people still wanted to go up there, despite all the barrage and propaganda about the local Indigenous group there wanting people not to climb. So that's what kicked me off in this. My latest foray is into Mount Warning in northern New South Wales, right up against the Queensland border. And the game plan that was used for Ayers Rock is playing out again at Mount Warning. So there we've got contested Aboriginal claims. So we've got a group there, the Hendrickx group, who support the public climbing. But oddly enough, national parks haven't even spoken to them really seriously up until recently. So for 20 years, they completely ignored them in favour of a group whose cultural story was called a modern day invention by other elders when it emerged in the late 1990s. So we've got this false Aboriginal story. On top of that, the government claims the climb is unsafe because, of course, we've all got to be safe as possible these days. And then climbers were causing environmental damage. So they're using those three things on a lot of places. The same game plan is being used in the Grampians in Victoria. You've got cultural heritage issues, you've got safety coming up, and you've got supposed environmental damage. And parks authorities seemingly across all the states and federally are using that same plan to lock us out of these national parks.
I think there's a two-pronged attack. I mean, it's been around for a while. The conservation side, we've been over the years. I remember going with my father into the state forests in particular, and you pick up a load of wood, basically sticks and that have fallen down. Gradually, they've basically banned those sort of things, basically because the theory is you're destroying some lizard's home or something like that. You're disturbing the ground. You've got situations where you basically can't pick up a rock and skim it across the lake or anything like that, because that's disturbing the ground. You can't just scurry over rock faces and things like that, and you certainly can't climb now on the environmental level. And of course, this Indigenous thing is another category that again is being used to deny all Australians access to the land. And I mean, we have been bombarded with Indigenous land rights, and yes, needs to be something done in regards to allocation of land, where they're going to use it, and really a big identified sites. But the claims are in a lot of ways a bit spurious. And I think after the voice vote, people were sort of, a little bit, they're pushing back when they had the opportunity, like a referendum. And then for these other things, we don't get any say. It's just a fait accompli that's delivered us. And you've provided, Alan's provided us with a little video, which I'll play, and basically this is the situation it's getting to at the moment. I'll just share this.
Well, I heard the kids at school today, they don't sing the anthem no more. Instead, apologize for things that happened 100 years before. Don't welcome me to my own country, I've been welcome all along. And I don't need a ceremony to tell me I belong. I am welcome. I've always been welcome. Hey, hey, hey. I turned the TV on last night to watch a football game.
That's a wonderful song, Bill. I love that song.
Okay. That's available on YouTube. Anyone can play it anytime they like. But there was a couple of things there. I mean, just stopping somewhere and picking up a bit of wood and lighting your own fire. Well, that's a no-no as well these days. So maybe you can come in now, Alan, and give us a bit of about your position in Save Our Summits.
Okay. First of all, can I just comment on the environmental thing about picking up sticks and rocks and so on, and the environmental impact of the presence of people, walking tracks and so on. Recently, in the last 3 years, we've had significant rainfall every season, and the damage, the natural damage within the national parks and the forests is absolutely mind-blowing, but it's natural. And it makes the impact that humans have on the tracks and even going off track is totally insignificant. It's less than a percent of the damage that natural environment does. Massive landslides, giant trees falling, erosion. It's just a natural thing. And the misnomer is that we are having an environmental impact by being there in the forest, and that's simply not the case. With SOS, we started in the Glasshouse Mountains as a group in relation to Mount Beerwar under threat of being closed. And yeah, it was interesting jumping on board. And I've become very passionate now, particularly from the environmental aspect. The misnomer that handing it over to the Aboriginal community to manage, that they will do a better job. That's not the case. And I have plenty of examples of that. And if you don't mind, I'll just mention a really obvious one. It's Burleigh National Park. Now, that's not closed, but it's been handed over. It's co-managed by an Aboriginal group. Since that time, and there's actually a tourist Aboriginal centre there that you can visit and talk about all the significance of the Burleigh Heads National Park. Very easy access, bitumen walkways all through, but it is now ever increasingly growing weeds. It is the most shameful thing I've seen in a long time. What could be a pristine, it's a very small national park, and what could be a very pristine example of our national parks or our native forests, especially this one being coastal, it's just falling apart. There are literally millions of weeds taken over Burleigh Heads National Park. So yeah, that's my contribution in relation to the fact that people think that by handing it back to the Aboriginal people, that somehow it will return to its natural state. It needs intervention. There were weeds everywhere that weren't here 230 years ago, and they need maintenance and work and control and people.
I think that's the thing. You always need Roundup to manage things. And the thing is, there's a greater focus now by all governments, state and federal, to acquire more land and put it under the umbrella of national parks or hand it back or under native title or whatever. But this is a great idea, is that they're not interested in funding what's needed to maintain it. They have not interested in employing people or putting people there. They just want to sit back in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane or Canberra and just patting themselves on the back that they've just locked up, another million hectares to basically run to rack and ruin. Because I think most farmers and most people who live next door to national parks and state forests knows the government is the worst manager of land. You can't think of a worse manager because that's the breeding ground of feral pigs and animals. It's the breeding ground of noxious weeds and that. And nothing gets done in there because they're not willing to spend the money needed. And now they also don't have the expertise in forestry or land management that they used to have in the field. It's all these experts in Canberra, Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, mainly for our eastern shore. Do you think the out of touch mindset of people in the city is causing the problem? Well, at least the ones in power.
I think
most definitely. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, look, I think that's really contributing to the problem. We had the amazing experience of coming off walking Mount Warning recently, and we were met by two rangers in the car park, and I asked both of them had they been up to the mountain summit, and both of them said no. These are the rangers that are supposedly responsible for managing the park. These are the rangers that presumably Minister Sharp has asked, what are the safety conditions like, and they haven't even been at the summit. And I think that's probably sitting, I don't know the time frame, maybe back 15 years ago you actually had rangers still working in national parks, actively doing little things like cleaning the toilets and picking up rubbish and looking after some of the basic maintenance, but that's all gone. So most of these rangers these days seem to be contract managers. So rather than involve the local community, quite often in the past we had friends of parks associations that could be put together to do a working bee on a Saturday or something like that to clean out some of the rubbish and look after the track in some way. they're not allowed in the park to do that anymore because, of course, they're not accredited anyway. You know, they don't have a chainsaw accreditation or an accreditation to do anything. So they're not allowed in because it's a safety risk issue. The national parks now contract all that work in by outside external contractors who are happy to go in there and be paid. And it's all coming out of taxpayers' money. They've got an estate in New South Wales. We just added a huge area in Western New South Wales, a former cattle station of several, 100,000 acres. They've got no resources.
I think that place starts with an N. I can't remember. It was a couple of years ago, but I think it's over a million acres or
it's a huge property.
It's huge.
But they've got no resources to look after what they've got at the moment. So the idea that you would hand a piece of land that big into the control of an organisation that simply doesn't have the capacity to look after it is just completely ridiculous. It's just asking for trouble. As you said, that run, it's probably a really good working cattle station when it was running, but now it's going to be overrun with feral animals, weeds, and the rest of it, because they don't have the capacity to manage these places from capital cities, and they don't really put staff in those areas anymore. It's really sad to see. For Mount Warning, there's a case. So we've been talking with an ex-anthropologist who used to work for national parks in the 70s and 80s, and his job was to go through and interview Aboriginal elders to find out the stories. The stories that were still connected back into men who had been initiated and grown up in the land in a traditional way. In the 1970s, you still had guys in their 80s around who still had at one point a traditional lifestyle. So all the stories there were genuine. For Mount Warning, there weren't any sacred sites on the mountain, for instance. For the whole of New South Wales, apparently there were 2 sites that they were worried about people going to. For Mount Warning, in its current state, we've had a private heritage firm come in and talk to this Aboriginal group, and suddenly there's over 40 sites on the mountain now that are so significant that you're not even allowed to walk in there. So national parks don't have the internal capacity in New South Wales to actually do a decent anthropological assessment because they don't have any anthropologists anymore. So that's
so basically just taking the word of the people who are supposed to have cultural connections. But I think that's one of the things is the problem. There doesn't seem to be a good classification system for what's a significant site or a sacred site sort of thing. It appears that things can be just a piece of landscape and it becomes significant or sacred. But it doesn't mean there was events there. It doesn't mean there was ceremony or anything like that. And of course an anthropological survey costs money, and to disprove it or prove it, they probably don't want to invest that sort of money. So they just accept whatever's said. But what sort of warning, well, Mount Warning, what sort of warnings do you get in regards to something's going to happen? Is it sort of years in the making, and there's consultation and there's community discussion and there's...
Absolutely. Yeah, these things are years in the making. So Ayers Rock, they started the process of closing the climb back when management of the park was handed to the Commonwealth Government. So back in 1985, the park used to be managed by the Northern Territory Conservation Commission to one of the highest standards anywhere in the world. So they had a man there as ranger, Derek Roll, who was an ex-Kenyan policeman, and he immigrated to Australia with his family and ended up being the leading ranger in Ayers Rock for quite a long time, nearly 20 years, I think. And when they handed it over to Commonwealth control, basically one of the things they wanted to do was close the climb down because they perceived it to be a safety issue. And they essentially worked, I think, for a long time to change the views of the traditional people there. So the old men who grew up the rock didn't have a problem with the climb. They were, pretty much indifferent to it. One of them, a fellow called Tiger Jackalera, actually acted as a climbing guide for a long time and used to do cultural dances in the campground there before the Yalara Resort was formed. So those guys, old guys, were pushed aside, and a new group came in, and they really worked with the Commonwealth federal government to start this process off. And they started it initially with signs at the base requesting people not to climb. And we saw that also at Mount Warning. So there's a sign at Mount Warning that says the traditional Bundjalung Nation custodians would rather you didn't visit the summit. We see it at Mount Biwa now and Mount Tibrigaga, those same signs. So that's the process you start to see. The sign goes up, and it's a sure sign that the closure is going to come. They'll be able to, St Mary's Peak in South Australia is another one. So the sign's there, and there's guidance within the National Park guidebook about not climbing to the summit of St Mary's Peak. So that's the way it starts off. And then Mount Warning, it was a trigger event like we had COVID, so they saw an opportunity to close the mountain because of supposed risks of COVID, which were completely nonsensical. That turned into a series of rolling 6-month closures for Mount Warning. Then in October 2022, they released a new Aboriginal Place Management Plan for the mountain, and that called for closure of the mountain. In fact, what that plan says is that the presence of anyone other than a select Aboriginal men's group is an act of desecration on a 109-year-old tract. You know, it's completely ridiculous.
Maybe Alan, you can talk on the impacts of these sort of things, because I did read a little bit in not that these stories get much mention in the newspaper, but if you do search the digital news and that, there has been a issue with the local community in regards to the drop off of visitor numbers adversely affecting small businesses in the area, and basically it continues. And these sort of things expand. We could see whole communities basically needing to shift or relocate because there's no visitors, there's no money coming, there's no business opportunity, so they have to go somewhere else.
That is a very significant issue around the Mount Warning area and the whole Tweed area in relation to the closure of Mount Warning. I was there just yesterday speaking to some of the business people in that area, and they're going to rally together, and they're now there was originally a bit of hesitation to fight back about the closure of the mountain because of the rumor of being racist, because it was the wishes of the particular Bunjalung tribe that have closed for sacred reasons, and nobody can question that without being, called names. Now that's sort of died down, and the business community are starting to get quite active and vocal, and it's good to see because, for instance, there's one very close caravan park there, a lovely caravan park. I visited it like 40 years ago, and it's still there and bumping along, and it's really convenient, lovely place, lovely people. And he tells me, the owner there, that it's costs him about $150,000 a year. The cafe across the road has gone. There are multiple businesses that have disappeared, and the balance of those that are still there are hurting. They don't get the same foot traffic there, obviously. Yeah, so it makes a big impact on it.
It's as though the governments don't give a care about small businesses and communities. They just have this ideological view that something has to happen, and not only that, they don't even know the scope that it's going to roll out to. You start one, then there's another and another. You can have a situation where you could basically, with enough different indigenous groups or even conservation groups want to close something down on conservation reasons, you could have massive areas now not available to people, and visitors, of course, no point going there. So any business opportunity that was there before is basically gone. So it can snowball into a much larger economic problem for a wider community.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it just go on. I was just going to say, and you just don't know where this stops, and that's probably where Marc's heading now. So I'll hand over to him. It's just going to snowball. You go, Marc.
Yeah, look, I was just going to mention, that up until Ayers Rock was closed, or probably just before, basically you had droves of Japanese tourists coming to Australia, and they would do three big things. They would, typically fly into either directly into into Cairns, and they would do a tour of the Great Barrier Reef. They would fly Cairns to Ayers Rock, and they would climb the rock, and then they would fly to Sydney and then home again. And that was a massive
Bucket
tourist
list.
industry. And that's
Bucket
gone
list
now.
sort of stuff.
And for those three things, so we've killed tourism at Ayers Rock. The Great Barrier Reef, if you believe, some of the government experts, basically it's dead, so why bother going there anyway? And Sydney at the moment, well, if you look at the amount of stabbings we've had recently, it's from a Japanese perspective, you probably think about going somewhere else. So we just continually shoot ourselves in the foot over and over again. Somehow the economy is magically still ticking over. It should be dead by all accounts, just for the sake of iron ore and coal. If we didn't get the royalties from those two commodities, we would be dead in the sand at the moment. Our tourist industry has just gone to water. We are absolutely, and it's our own fault. And it's being led by the government. It's supposed to be providing jobs and in regional communities, and they don't give a toss.
But the people in Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane don't care. They see it as big brownie points for the environment. Like it's like we mentioned the cattle farm that was bought up. Well, in Queensland, we've just had 3 large properties bought up in Longreach, Winton area. They totaled over 500,000 hectares, and they're under the parks estates, or so protected parks estates system. And we've got different systems. We've got other buyouts by NGOs and that with buy up and lock up. But these were managed cattle stations, 30,000 stock, basically creating employment, also requiring service from maintainers, fuelers, and people for supplying food. That's all gone in one fell hit. So if you're threatening communities with basically regression and withering, but the scary part, the worst part of it is they're actually going to bulldoze all the improvements that have been put over the 100 years. So they're going to bulldoze fence, bulldoze all the outbuildings. Depending on the quality of the homestead, that might get bulldozed. All the watering points, windmills and that, it's going to go back to year zero. And guess what? They won't be having any money allocated to manage it, to maintain, stop the weeds, stop the feral animals and that. So it's brought up on the basis that it's going to add to the natural environment, protect native species, both fauna and flora. And guess what? If you've got noxious, got to have just unmanaged area, noxious weeds and feral animals, I don't think the native animals are going to fare so well. So it's a bit hypocritical in a lot of the plans that they got.
Absolutely, yeah. And so the other thing for me is that it doesn't matter which government's in charge, it doesn't matter which party is in charge of government. These things seem to be crossing party lines here. So the Ayers Rock closure, for instance, happened under Scott Morrison's, or might have been Malcolm Turnbull's watch. Mount Warning was closed under a coalition government in New South Wales. What doesn't change is the bureaucracy sitting behind it all. These are the guys that are really seemingly making the decisions here. It doesn't seem to be government anymore. Government ministers don't take responsibility for everything. They just hand responsibility down. It wasn't my decision. I had a committee set up and the committee recommended X, Y, Z. We've got expert advice that provided the reason for this decision, So it's really difficult, unless we get a turnaround where government ministers start taking responsibilities for their portfolios again. We're likely to see this continue to roll on, and it doesn't matter which party's in charge, or which the major party's in charge. I mean, I can see a real change coming if someone like One Nation, for instance, were to get in power, which is, a real turnover in the way things are managed. But while the major parties are in charge, this thing's just going to keep going.
And the other thing is you already got the installed bureaucrats, and I'm not sure the situation in New South Wales in the bureaucracy, state bureaucracy, but I am fully aware that within the bureaucracy in Queensland, you got the chief of staff who originally about 2017 or 18 was the chief of staff for the environmental minister, and is now and has been the chief of staff for the premier, going back even to Anastasia's before Anastasia would quit. Yeah, that's Nick Heath. He was the former chairman of the WWF Australia, Australian Conservation Society, and several other things. Now, if you've got him as the chief of staff and you're also employing in the normal bureaucracy people of that ilk who come from the conservation side, you're not going to get a fair decision in regards to what's warranted and what's not. A good balance between the general public and specific purposes.
Yeah, it seems to be very much one side of the political spectrum making all the decisions, and it's mainly on the left that this is coming through for sure. Yeah, and a lot of these people seem to be grounded. They've been to university, they've been indoctrinated in a lot of left-wing nonsense at this stage, and they just carry that through their careers, and it's really hurting the country at the moment, I think.
You worked for the government in your younger days, sort of thing, doing the surveys and that.
Yeah.
And you would have noticed, even around Victoria, there was still a lot of field officers located regionally.
Absolutely, yeah.
But that was for all the. I remember in Western Australia, on the wheat farms and things like that, there was agricultural department. I suppose they were experimental farms or something like that, or whatever. But they were out places like Merredin in the wheat fields, and I suppose they were working with the farmers to develop better methods for planting and better varieties and things like that. And there was also, we had foresters, we had people who, yes, they went to university and got their forestry qualifications, but then for most of their life, they live in the regional centres in forests and things like that, and knew exactly what was going on the ground. Now, we've got a situation when there's things like Vegetation Management Act or something like that that's being introduced, coming out of Brisbane. We have people who have 40 years experience, even working with the Department of Primary Industries and that, now retired at that, but they have this history and knowledge and even photographic evidence as well. Now, their input is into the consultation process and all the submissions and that is basically saying, well, you don't need to do this. We've got it under control. It's not harmful. What they're doing, the farmers are doing, is not harmful to the environment, but that 40 years experience is dissed in favour of just whatever comes out of the hierarchy and the bureaucracies, because we had the Vegetation Management Act in 2007 amendment. It had 712 submissions. It had about 20 town meetings ranging from Mount Isa down to Rockhampton and everywhere between. But not one word of that legislation changed, despite all the input of landowners and people with expertise going about 40 odd years in the field, plus documented history of more than 100 years. It didn't make one iota of difference. So, do you think you with your efforts with Save Our Summits and things like that? I don't know if you share my frustration, sort of thing, but do you see a way to make these things change anyway? I mean, it seems to be like there's a brick wall, go and put your bang your head against it.
You got to go on.
Yeah, what I would say about that is that people power, and I think what SOS has been successful with so far is rallying larger groups of people. Once they see that there are people interested, the ones on the fringe jump on board, and the community grows. And I think that's what put off the closure of Beerwar, the meetings we had there. The groups of people were just a little too daunting, and the particular activist who was, waving, getting up in front of the ABC on a regular basis saying how we're desecrating his mother mount and all that. He eventually said, look, no one likes me, and he's gone. He's left the area. So it's that pressure of people is what makes a big difference. And that's what we're working on in the Mount Warning area now. And it's really heartening to see, like I mentioned before, the business community now feel brave enough to speak out against what is supposedly a sacred thing. And the government has to notice. The media jumps on board when there's a big community there, big group. And I think ultimately, I'm positive, and I'm sure Marc is as well, that the pressure is kept on. The people, the group grows. Our group is growing and growing. More and more people are jumping on board with our group. And we also work in closely with other groups, which, creates a large body of people who want these places accessible, as they should be accessible. In relation to Mount Warning, by the way, there's no good reason for it to be closed, not safety and not even cultural. And I won't go into why that is. I just want to mention, in just the 4 years, I don't recall, I've been thinking about it, seeing cane toads in national parks, but Mount Warning now have cane toads there. I was reading recently that they're the biggest threat to the quoll, which is endangered. So there are quolls in that area, all in the border ranges, all in that area, Mount Warning and so on. And now they have a meal of cane toads freely hopping around. So that's the kind of damage environmentally that this decision, that's the impact that it can have on the environment, negative impact.
Well, I suppose the thing is, now that people are not going there, there's no reporting of problems, and that's one thing. But your organisation probably should be be heartened by some of the success of the anti-renewables people in fighting back against wind farms and solar farms and other things invading their lands. They seem to have got a fair bit of momentum, and they continue to grow that momentum. I suppose the best thing that could happen to Mount Warring to help you would be someone to propose a wind farm up there, and you get 100,000 people up there going, no wind farm, But this thing is just the cultural side of it, make it sort of harder for people to actually speak their mind and sort of, forthrightly, basically. Do you have to sort of tone the conversation down so it doesn't look like you're attacking the Indigenous culture or heritage of that? And just do you find it, or other people in the area find it a bit daunting that they're critical of these changes and this acquisition of land or closure of land?
Oh, look, for Mount Warning, we're lucky in a way. So now we've got the rightful custodians who have a very strong claim on the mountain. This is the work that was done by this anthropologist fellow, Harry Freeman. So they've got a very close connection. Unfortunately, 20 years ago, national parks decide with the other side, right? So they went with this Bundjalung view, which was proven to be false when it first emerged, but somehow it got stuck within the National Parks regional managers and became National Parks policy. And shameful, to their great shame, for 20 years they ignored this group because they weren't saying the right thing, essentially. It's only been recently that they've re-emerged. And part of the problem has been because national parks have had 20 years of essentially promoting this view, which is pretty much just propaganda. They even got one of the universities. So Southern Cross University did a study for them to try and demarket the park, right? This is one of Australia's national treasures. And the government of New South Wales paid the university department to demarket this absolute treasure. And as part of that study, they did a visitor survey, and they quoted visitors the Bundjalung view that you shouldn't climb the mountain, and they made no mention at all of the alternate Aboriginal opinion. And to their surprise, actually, most people said they were still going to climb, but they would have been, would be more so if they had included the wonderful words of one of the Rapwell elders who said you should go to the summit so you can witness the joy and wonder of creation. Such a wonderful statement that she made, Marlene Boyd. But that was ignored by government. So government have been basically, so you've got 20 years of indoctrination to overcome. So part of the problem with locals is they still don't and aren't aware of these alternate Aboriginal views that are out there. So you've got to get across that. There's a lot of, you've got to get across all the government resources involved. So there's, you've got departments with a hell of a lot of money to control the agenda, control what's the message. You've got media organisations like the ABC who are completely useless. They don't challenge any of this. In fact, for Mountain Warning, they're actually pretty much embedded with national parks and sort of selling this false message. You've got to get over that. So but because we've been active in letting people know the truth about Mount Warning, more and more people have been willing to get on board to say, no, there is this other Aboriginal story. That one appears to be much more genuine than the one we've been fed for 20 years. And the tide is slowly changing there. And the government knows it. We had a debate in Parliament last Thursday. So we had this petition which kicked off after an Australia Day climb this year, supported by the Libertarian MLC John Ruddick. We needed 10,000 signatures on that. We got that. So there was a debate last Thursday in Parliament House. And it was a shambles of a debate. I tell you what, if anyone wants to see how badly our money's being spent, go and spend a day in the public gallery of one of our parliaments to see how little gets done and how poorly it gets done. John Ruddick gave a great speech outlining the facts of the matter. We had the Greens come up and just spruik a whole lot of juvenile nonsense about colonial genocide, that we're all white colonisers, and in fact, the Parliament actually had no right to have any say whatsoever on this Aboriginal land. And then we had Penny Sharp, who's the minister. Penny Sharp, to her credit, actually did go up and speak with a lot of people about it in Northern New South Wales. So hopefully, she's slowly listening to what's going on. But in the end, she just kicked the can down the road. So Mount Warning's still in limbo, with the government saying it needs to, further consultations, more stakeholder engagement. And we're still waiting to get a positive decision out of the government on this. But I think, common sense, the facts that we've presented must dictate, the damage and harm that's been done to the local community must dictate that this mountain be reopened to everyone,
Well, they aren't really listening, and the scary thing is that there's sitting behind the Parliament is all these bureaucrats planning their next foray into someone else's region to sort of spring a surprise on them. Can you give us maybe, Alan, you can give us a bit of an idea of what's in the offering for maybe New South Wales and Australia in general? What other targets have they got? Roughly how many, and how are they progressing?
You saying in relation to closing?
Yes.
Well, there was an acquisition in the Lake Eyre catchment area, which was really suspicious with the state government in Queensland. It was only announced a month or so ago, I think. That was several 100,000 kilometres, as most of those properties are, and it's now classified as a national park, I believe. But that was announced as possible because an international conservation group donated several millions of dollars to that. And I find that a little bit odd. I mean, you don't give millions of dollars to a foreign country to lock up a block of land without and turn it into supposedly a national park without some, what do we get for that? There was some parrot, particularly in that area, I think. Am I getting mixed up with the Longreach? No, this is the one with the little parrot that's endangered. They reckon this will save it by having it turn into a national park.
Yeah, well,
That's a
the
lot.
three properties I'm talking about, the Longreach, Winton, and there. I think there's over 500,000 hectares. But that's also leads to the Channel country. So that's part of their thing in regards to, well, we've got to protect the flow of water and that goes to Lake Erie and that. So the Channel country is another focus at the moment. They basically want everyone out of there and just go LR natural sort of thing. It speaks badly in regards to these things. Obviously, the methodology that you're using is basically ensuring that the regions like Winton and Longreach and Western Queensland cannot progress, because if you go to put these roadblocks in there, there's never going to be any water projects, water diversion projects to help irrigation to improve the land. It just makes that land completely off limits. You might as well just dig a big hole to the center of Earth and say, well, there's an area that no one's going to use or see or whatever. It doesn't really make sense, but that's what they seem to want, is the areas locked up and no human goes across them, and there's no human intervention. And you mentioned late air. I think that's another thing that they're looking at, is almost stopping all other than a few people accessing the, I think it's the eastern end of Lake Eyre.
That's it. That's
really?
right.
No more Donald Campbell's doing runs across the Salt Lakes. No more visitors, marbling out of nature. It does seem to be a concerted effort to disconnect people from the environment, the natural environment and country.
Absolutely.
Like if you live in Sydney and you're an avid hiker or something like that, and you go up the Blue Mountains to enjoy the great outdoors, and someone says, "Oh, it's closed," you might as well stay in your unit in Sydney and spend the rest of your life there. Is that what we're looking at if something doesn't change? Like, these people have some success, they'll keep trying and trying for more.
Well, can I use an example? Birdsville, for instance. That's actually quite a significant Aboriginal destination over thousands and thousands of years. I was there when there was flooding rain, and it looks like it's all flat, but Birdsville is actually a little bit of a hump. So before we arrived, it was a spot for riding out the floodwaters, that little mound, which is Birdsville. Now, that's a very, very popular tourist destination, and I went there for the races, and I was working with the Royal Flying Doctor Service the year before last. And it was a real eye-opener seeing some of the station properties out there and why they've been abandoned due to floods and so on. But, what's stopping that from becoming sacred? Because it is an Aboriginal place. And then they say, no, you have to get out of there. There's less than 100 people actually live there. So it wouldn't be very hard for them to justify shutting the place down. And that's the kind of thing that I'm sure a lot of people who are across these closures are fearful of.
Well, but it does seem to be growing. And like I say, if Birdsville has a history in regards to the community, people go there as one of the rites of passage sort of thing to go to the Birdsville races, and even on tours and things like that. Like you say, it wouldn't be hard for them to cross it off your list.
100%.
There's a good example of that in Victoria at the moment. So Lake Tyrrell used to have an annual car rally around it for a long time, and that's now been closed. So this is in Western Victoria. Very major event for the local community there in terms of bringing in a lot of tourists and a lot of competitors for this race. That's been closed now because the state government wanted a Aboriginal heritage assessment to be done along the length of the road, and they wanted someone else other than them to pay for it. And it's just about impossible to get that done. And the outcome of that is so uncertain that the organisers have just given up all hope. So there's another example, Lake Tyrrell in Victoria. In terms of the bigger agenda, where is this all going? I argued in the Quadrant essay recently, our unique Australian character, our spirit, really is founded on our connection to our landscape. And even as most of us live in cities at the moment, we still have that connection to the beach and the bush. We still go picnicking. A lot of us still go hiking or rock climbing or four-wheel driving or hunting, or horse riding, whatever. We still have this connection to country, and that really forms and has formed and has been critical to me in forming our unique Australian character. Our sense of resilience in the face of hardship brought about natural disasters, for instance. Comes about because we go through drought and flooding rains all the time, and we experience those severe bushfire events. Our spirit of mateship, our sense of humour. I find that if we decide to cut ourselves off from the country, we risk losing the very essence of what makes us Australian. That's what's at risk here with these proposed lockdowns.
Do you think it's the fact that these people in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Canberra are so rooted into their concrete jungle and that lifestyle that they don't give a nix about, I'm not going to bother about going tramping over some barren bit of land or some dense forest. I'm going to plan my next trip to Rome or the Mediterranean or something like that, because I'm earning $300,000 as a bureaucrat or a public servant in Canberra. So I'm not going to waste my time buying a tent and going out in the bush and having no 5-star service. Do you think maybe that's a factor, that there's so many people now in the cities that don't want to, can't be bothered, or it's all too hard for them to venture out there?
One of the problems, I think, like national parks are making it harder and harder for people to actually go and explore these places. You brought up the Blue Mountains recently, so national park, we had a couple of accidents in the Blue Mountains recently with rock falls killing a few people. And national parks have now completely overreacted. So the merest sniff of a bit of rain coming, they've got a system in place which closes those parks. So for the group of people who want to get on the train or get in the car and drive from Sydney to the Blue Mountains, and it's not that far, why bother if it's going to be closed all the time? So as you say, I'll plan a holiday in Switzerland or Northern Italy where I know when I go there, I'm not going to have an access problem. I can go there, it'll be open. I won't be made to feel guilty about going and enjoying these natural places as I do in Australia. So we are just shooting ourselves in the foot with all these dumb regulations which are locking people out of our country. Yeah.
Well, if you go to Europe, you can go to places where they've dig up bodies, and there's burials of famous people, and there's graves of famous people, and there's battlefields and that. But as long as you don't go out there with a shovel and start putting a shovel into the ground, it's not off limits. I mean, that's the heritage of Europe, and that they don't, they do everything they can to keep them open to have visitors. But what I was sort of suggesting in regards to, do you think the people who are deciding this are just the type of people that wouldn't go anyway, versus people like yourself who you obviously earn a decent wage and that, but the thing is, you do like the environment and you do like sort of roughing it and that, and so do a lot of other people. They enjoy just going camping, and it's and it's a simple. But they wouldn't do it. I'm sure a lot of people in Canberra working for that parliament wouldn't even know how to put up a tent.
Well, Mark mentioned the word connection before, Mark. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
These people just don't have that connection to the country, to the environment. And it's a very special and a real blessing to have it. And I feel sorry for those people in that regard, because their world is not, it's not, they don't understand the natural world, and they don't care. You're dead right. It's a matter of, they don't care, but they don't understand either about locking these natural places away from people who treasure it and need it, and absolutely mental health, physical, for lots of reasons, spiritual reasons. We don't have to be black to have a spiritual connection to our land. So you're right, absolutely agree.
Bill, I'll just read something that Ian Palmer wrote. So Ian wrote the forward for my book, Guide to Climbing Ayers Rock, and I put a little bit of that excerpt in my book, A Guide to Climbing Mount Warning. He said, those who climb, bushwalk and camp in nature are the true environmentalists and sympathisers of past cultures, whereas those that deny these simple pleasures, be they Ayers Rock, Mount Warning or St Mary's Peak, are living in cocoons isolated from those they allegedly serve. And I think Ian's got it dead right there. So and I think they don't have that connection, as Alan said. They're missing something in their lives, and they're living in this cocoon, artificial world, so they can make these stupid decisions. Okay,
maybe the people in the regions should work on a policy of locking everyone who's in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane for a radius of 50 kilometres. They all stay there and they have to get a permit to come out. And meantime, we'll look after our own business in the regions. And I think that's one of the big problems. The people in the regions have got bugger all political representation to disarm these swathes of politicians that are voted in around our capital cities. So somehow, and even our senators, like, I'm in Queensland. It's a far bigger state than New South Wales and Victoria, and people, we've got senators, and they claim that they're, we've got Matt Canavan, Susan McDonald in Townsville, Canavan's in Rockhampton, and I think it's Nikita Green, Labor one in Cairns. Now, they claim to be, regional and looking after the regions, but the fact is they still belong to the machinery of Brisbane that's deciding what's all going out. And same with a lot of our politicians. We've got 3 members of parliament in the Cairns area, and basically they're just parrots of what's ever coming out of Brisbane. We really do need a stronger say in what goes on in our own backyard. Well, no, in our place. We are not the city's backyard, and I don't know. Do you remember the Bush Summits? Every year there's a thing called Bush Summits. I think Gina Reinhardt sponsors them, and they have a Bush Summit, and there's a meeting in each state in a regional city. Except when you go into West Australia, it was in Perth. That's not very regional. but the thing is, the advertising, the Bush Summit, our beautiful backyard. Well, guess what? It's not your bloody backyard. It's where we live in the regions, and we should have a bigger say and control it as well. Because what the politicians in Sydney and Brisbane and Melbourne are doing is against the growth of regional areas. I mean, you close down Mount Warning, you are putting regional people out of business. You're affecting their livelihoods and their welfare and their mental health, and they don't get it. And I suppose what I'm sort of suggesting to you, that's one thing you need to push, that this is not the way to treat your regional cousins.
I'm just looking at that map in Queensland behind you. You've got all these, far north, northern, Mackay, central. One of the problems I think we've got is the state, federal, local government system we've got. And I think one of those levels of government is required and meets the states. The states are too centralised. They only deal with basically the CBD areas. If you look at the map behind you, if you broke up in Australia into a smaller series,
that's 4 states.
Yeah, absolutely. For bureaucracies admittedly, but I mean, at least they're looking after, issues closer to home. So one of this, solving this problem has a lot to do with the way the country was set up in the first place, I think. We're over-governed as it is, if we remove one of those tiers of government and
but actually our forefathers were pretty smart. They actually provided us with a whole chapter in the Constitution to create more states. I mean, if the 1967 New South Wales referendum for a new state of northeast New South Wales, you would be living in the state of New England up in Mount Waring. You wouldn't be a state of the New South Wales. You would have a more local state government. So the people, it's the methods there. We just haven't got the vision to do it, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think, look, going to Mount Waring, one of the things we need to do is just persist. We've got to make sure the politicians, we know we're not going to go away on these issues, that we're going to continue fighting, but they, once we get to the point where we lay down and do nothing, then they can ignore us. So one of the, things we need to do is just persist. It's frustrating, as you mentioned earlier, but we need to persist with this and try to keep it on the radar. For other places as well, my advice, as Alan mentioned, it's about people power. We've got what we call a silent majority in Australia, and they really need to find a voice and start shouting loud and putting pressure on these, our politicians to do things that are important in those areas, or we will be forgotten about. And that's what's happened. We've been complacent, and we haven't done enough to make sure the politicians hear our voices.
Well, the other thing is too, I would, if you go back 20 years, at least you had the National Party and then that was sort of appeared to look after regional people, but they're only a shadow of themselves, and they're too closely tied to the Liberal Party to be effective representatives for their own electorates and their own communities. Are you sort of disappointed with the interest, assistance, or whatever you want to call it, from local politicians or across the wider area of the regions? I mean, you might have one or two here and there that get behind you because it's that they vote depends on it. But are you disappointed with the political representation to take this matter forward? Because I think you mentioned John Ruddick. I've had him interviewed with Show, but he's in the upper house. I think he lives in Sydney itself. Yes, he's got a lot of good points in that. But really, you need local politicians to basically be able to, put them under pressure to say, well, you're not going to keep your seat if you don't look after our issues.
Look, there's two politicians up in the Mount Waring area. So Janelle Sapp, like the state politicians, Janelle Sapp and Jeff Provost. Mount Waring actually sits in Janelle Sappin's electorate. Unfortunately, it's very hard to know what their views are because they've been, effectively muzzled by head office. So for both of them. So what would be great would be for, politicians to try and step out of this party framework a little bit and speak for their communities rather than having to worry about what head office is going to say, but they have to say. That, politicians being more community minded rather than party minded. But the system we've got in place probably doesn't allow that as much as it should. So to me, it's about voting for a strong local independent candidate who's going to put you first rather than the party first.
Well, I think the issue there is, where a person isn't meeting the community's expectations, no matter if that's the party of your choice or whatever, vote them out anyway, because they're just mouthing what's ever coming out of the capital city, and vote for an independent, and hopefully at least an independent is usually a local person, so the community's probably got more influence over him or her than they have over a person who's connected to a party, whether they're Liberal, Labor, or well, don't worry about the Greens, you'll never get anything out of them. So I suppose it does become an issue where you have to pose a political threat to these people before they do something. And I find that one of the biggest problems is a lot of groups, community groups, grow up over an issue, and the first thing they say is we're apolitical, and politicians love to hear that because you're offering that you're not posing any threat to a political party or a member. So does it mean, well, as far as I'm concerned, you need somewhere along the line, you do have to align with someone, because there's obviously parties that are never going to help you, right? You're never going to appeal to the Greens in these sort of issues. And then if one party, like the Labor Party, doesn't seem to be overly interested in the regions or this sort of stuff, so does it? Do you have to throw your alignment to another party, or actually, well, let's find a local independent and sort of push them? Because if you look at New South Wales, it's you've got three seats that used to be safely national, or even going back to the old Country Party. But now they went to shooters, fishers and farmers, but all those 3 seats are now independent. So independents can do well. So maybe it's a matter of talking, being a threat to politicians, and making it an opportunity for independents to get a foothold. Or do you think that's too much of a risk? It's better not to be threatening your local politician with getting the boot.
No, I think that's the way to go. Yeah, definitely. If there's no threat, then they're going to become complacent, and they'll be more inclined to just follow and toe the party line. So the more people we can get involved in politics as well, 40 years ago or so, the membership of both Liberal and Labor Party were huge, and you had a huge pool of people to call on to represent their communities out of those parties. So you've got some decent people who had, a lot of life experience before they actually put their hands up to become politicians. These days, Labor Party's like a machine. You go to university, you become a staffer, and then next minute you're representing your community somehow, as if you know anything about the world, the real world around you. So we need more politics. We need more people to get involved and interested in politics. We need more independents out there. We need people, really, the public, to support these independents. To think outside the square when they're voting. Don't just go the normal route and vote for the party your father's voted for the last 50 years or so. Those parties are completely different from the way they were that time. So, yeah, people need to think about how they vote, I think, is one of the key things.
I'll just go over to you, Alan, in regards to what the subject we're talking about. We obviously have seen a shift away from the major parties. Neither of their primary votes down in the 30s, unless they're a diehard area. And there is an opportunity for independents to get in. So do you see this dropping off of that primary vote for these 2 major parties as an opportunity and a entrance for you to ramp up your conversation for Save Our Summits?
Well, I'm not very au fait with politics. Always been involved in. I'm pretty much a conservative, but I've been very thoughtful about my votes over the years. But I've lost all faith in both sides, the major parties. Others, the third one, I don't even give any credit to, the fake environmental party. But I don't have any faith in them. So I am now looking seriously for an alternative. Yeah, I think that's the way forward. More of a collection, and like I say, I don't know a whole lot about politics, but more a collective of independents who are not under the banner of what Marc alluded to there before, and what you were talking about, having to toe the line ultimately, even as an individual politician. I think we need more individuals in there representing their sector of the community, without the interference of the banner and the overriding major concept of a particular party.
And people who've had real life experience, that would be a big help in the first place.
Oh, absolutely. People that come from the community, and there seems to be more of those with the independents, because they've jumped on board because they've been passionate and they've seen what's happened. as opposed to the career politicians or the ones that have gone through, the union sector or the, law degree or whatever, and then straight into politics, like you said, that don't have any real world experience. Much better to have a new, fresh face that's been in the business community, who understands and actually connected to the real issues of the people. These people are so disconnected down there. I was down there in the Parliament on this week as well, and really opened my eyes in a bad way.
Well, I think for people in regional Queensland, especially North Queensland, Central Queensland, I think it's a real cultural shock when they go to Brisbane. It's a completely different world. They're not even talking the same language. They don't even have the same cares or anything like that. So this disparity between people in the regions and people in the cities has become more and more apparent. Just before you wind up, because we've been going over the hour, maybe I'll throw to each of you, Alan first, and then you, Mark, in regards to what's on the agenda for the immediate future, far as your work, trying to make people aware of this issue, and who are you trying to, at reasonable levels, trying to draw into the conversation to sort of get some gravitas to your argument?
From my perspective, more education on the illusion that the Aboriginal people are the caretakers, the most appropriate caretakers of country, of the land, of the environment. The more that people are highlighted that fact, and I know it's a fact. It's just, and I'll be doing as much as I possibly can to let people know that, and that the example I made with the Burleigh Heads one is one I'm going to work on a little bit more. I need to meet the Aboriginal group that are looking after that and just find out what the issue is there. Is it funding? Is it just they don't care? I feel it might be that they don't care. For example,
revenue.
Pardon?
Provided they're getting revenue or notoriety.
Yeah, look, it's not just the colour of your skin that gives you the connection and the passion and the urge to protect our environment. It's as simple as that. We're all humans, and there's no distinction in between your care for where we live based on your cultural background. I find that absurd, and the more I learn about it, I find it more and more absurd. I can't spend a lot of time on this, but I just like to sum up. I did think about the playground of the people in the city, the natural playground. You just think about this for a second. How about we start with the beaches? Lock the beaches down because of their cultural significance and because of the danger. The number of people that die at beaches are just phenomenal compared to the dangers that they say of climbing in the mountains, the number of people that fall and hurt themselves. The beaches are far more dangerous. Let's lock out these city people from Bondi. Let's close down the beaches and say, sorry, you can't go there. It's cultural significance. Let's see what happens then.
Yeah, you can't go rock fishing or beach fishing or anything like that.
Or swimming or sailing your massive multi-million-dollar boat in Hawkesbury River, whatever.
I think probably one of the problems is we've had drummed into us, the Indigenous people were custodians of the land and that. But really, I mean, people, and we were no different when we were sort of Stone Age people. We exploited the land to the limit of our technology, and the Indigenous people did that as well. I mean, the fire stick farming is a factor. They did it not for the environment, but to ensure a sustainable food source. By, if you get rid of the undergrowth and you encourage grass, well, then you get wildlife there to hunt and eat. And the other thing is dense forest areas like your Mount Waring. I bet you if you went up there, you'd be hard pressed to get a decent feed off the local animal sort of thing. Most of the local, the place to get a good feed is out on the plains and things where there's a lot of kangaroos and wombats and things like that. That's a bit more out in the open. But I don't think dense forests have ever been a good source of food because it never had a good source of ground cover because tree litter basically killed off the grassland. So anyway, that's another topic. Now over to you, Mark, just to close off. What you've got in store for yourself and who you're going to engage in over the next few months.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having us on tonight too. And I know there's quite a few people from Save Our Summits and the Red and Mount Warning Facebook group watching tonight, so cheerio to them. My focus will remain in getting Mount Warning reopened. We've got enough facts on the table now. We've got enough information out there that it's going to be very hard for the government to try and keep it closed. Across the border in New South Wales, we've got the glasshouse mountains, which are really under threat. So those signs I mentioned that are at Mount Warning and at Ayers Rock are at the base of Mount Evermore and Hendrickx. So we've been looking at getting some documents out of the Queensland government. So we've got quite a large FOI request in with the Queensland government, which is currently in the process of being completed. So that'll be interesting to see what comes out of those documents. So we're looking at information from the government about their plans for the Hendrickx and other glasshouse mountains. We'll continue to engage the local community at Newcastle and at Willumba. So they've really found their voice after being, came out of the COVID period where everyone seemed to sort of accept that we couldn't have a voice, but they've found their voice. So we'll work further with the locals in Newcastle and get their mountain back to them. And then we'll spread our view wider and just try and, if we can get Mount Warning reopened, it sort of sets the stage for making sure, one, the government pays attention when people stand up and say, this is ours as well. This has been ours for a long time, and we deserve to have access to it. And it will, I think, make them think twice about doing things in other places around the country. So we're going to continue with this local fight, and we're going to get this mountain reopened again.
I suppose it's important to concentrate on one thing to get a victory, because one victory leads to another, and it also leads to government, like you say, having second thoughts, and maybe we're not going to get away with this sort of thing. And it may bite them in the backside in regards when it comes to election as well. So I think all sort of groups like yourself, somewhere along the line, always have to pose a political threat to be noticed, as well as having a loud voice and a good numbers. But yeah, I mean, you do need to put those politicians who sit safely down in that parliament, put them on notice that they're not just going to have their way with our natural environment.
Absolutely. Bill, can I just also add this, this requires resourcing as well. So the opposing forces here have got all the funding behind them from government, from NGOs and the rest of it. We are basically fighting this on a shoestring budget. So people want to chip in. Save Our Summits have got a donation page. If you want to support me, I've got, my books at Connor Court. So please, have a look at Connor Court for a guide to climb Mount Warning and a guide to climbing Ayers Rock. But we also need that financial support as well, so we can do these things. That FOI request I mentioned is over $1,000 to get that through, and we really need some more funds to help us, fight this battle.
Well, we'll post those links on the video that we put out on Facebook and that to
Thanks,
sort of make that happen. So yeah, look. If you can just stay on the line for a minute, I'll introduce our next episode and then have a little chat live offline, if that's okay with you two gentlemen.
Yes, please.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, thank you. If you've enjoyed the show, please like, share and subscribe to our Facebook page. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now, this is a special Monday episode. We'll be back on our normal episode on Wednesday, and our guest will be Ian Plimmer. And we will be talking about the climate is etched in stone. All you need to know about our past history and our past weather and our past carbon levels, we'll be discussing that and what what the past can give us a guide to the future rather than computer models. So please join me again Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. Thank you.